There is one day each year that every mentally ill teenage girl looks forward to. And that day is when Spotify Wrapped comes out. Whether it's the accomplishment she feels after being told she's in the top 5% of Mitski listeners, or the embarrassment she feels when Lin-Manuel Miranda is one of her top 5 artists. Online streaming has not only provided mentally ill teenagers with a continuous outlet of entertainment, but it's created a whole new universe of consumer satisfaction. It is because side opposition cares about the consumer inside and outside the realm of media consumption, we are so proud to oppose today's motion. This House regrets the diminished market of available physical media as a result of the rise of online streaming. In this speech, I'll be doing a couple of things. First, going over some brief framing. Then, responding to side proposition's case. Lastly, giving side opposition's first two substantive argument. Now, going on to their framework, they didn't provide any definitions within today's debate, so we'll be defining our own. Their whole framework relies on their burden, which is the principle of providing the best consumer experience. Now, we agree with this burden, but we'd also like to note that this consumer experience isn't only going to exist in media consumption, but also exists on the outside life as well. Now, going on to our framework, we define physical media as any tangible form of entertainment. Additionally, online streaming services can be defined as any digital platform that delivers multimedia content. Now, going on to their first substantive argument, which is tangible ownership. Their first layer of analysis is unpopular media being removed. We see this is going to be virtually impossible on side opposition side of the house, especially with digital footprint existing. There is no physical way for the media to be completely removed, especially because it's more likely to transfer to different platforms versus on side proposition when a physical source is depleted, it is gone when there's no way of actually getting it back. Now, going on to the second layer of analysis, where they talk about the data privacy concerns associated with online streaming. We say that we're actually going to be able to utilize this data that we're collecting from our consumers to overall better make their experience on these media platforms better. We'd also like to note that this problem doesn't actually not exist on side proposition side of the house. By this, I mean that physical media often can be bought online, and security advantages are not actually going to be successfully fulfilled on side proposition side of the house. Now, going on to the second substantive argument where they talk about internet accessibility. The first layer of analysis is people in poverty. Now, if they're in severe poverty, as that proposition wants me to believe, they won't have access to large amounts of physical media as well, making the barrier to entry still going to occur on side prop. Now, going on, accessibility is going to exist on both sides, but there is not a single free option that side proposition can ethically tell me they're going to provide, whereas on side opposition, we have free options that are accessible as long as you have access to internet. Now, going on, they say that streaming live events can contribute to carbon emissions, and this is going to actually negatively affect people in these third world countries. Well, we see that, again, carbon emissions are going to happen on both sides of the house, but when you have to talk about the physical transferring of physical media, such as going from an airplane to a barrier to another car to a different car, we're going to see that the amount of carbon emissions that are going to happen in physical media are going to far surpass the ones that are going to happen in the digital media realm. Now, going on to our first substantive argument, which is the barrier to entry. It's important to note that the average physical media ranges from around $20 to $100, but the average subscription service such as Netflix costs a consumer $15 a month, and a regular streaming service such as Spotify is free as long as you agree to watch ads. We see that the average low-income American won't be able to afford the same level of physical media than the higher-income individual would be able to afford. Our first layer of analysis is overall consumption. In the status quo, we see that when you buy a source of physical media, you receive one film or one show. If you find out that you do not like the show, you are more often stuck with that choice and either A, choose to disregard the media, or B, let the media sit around and collect dust. Whereas in a world where we don't regret the rise of online streaming, we see people downloading services like Netflix to find their favorite movie. If they do not like the movie, they are simply open to an array of options where they are bound to find something that they do like. But how does this actually work? Well, physical media can often become expensive extremely quick, and due to a lack of digital involvement, the consumer is in charge of finding similar artists, and they usually have to spend even more money to experiment with different artists. But on side opposition, this looks completely different. Well, online streaming services offer a unique consumer experience, especially with music platforms such as Spotify. We see a consumer being able to listen to their favorite artists and like their songs. Spotify takes note that this person likes the music and finds artists that are similar. Not only this, but Spotify creates a playlist for this consumer so they can be introduced to a selection of new artists. Keep in mind, this is what Spotify consumers receive for free. The impact of this is that we see a more satisfied consumer who is not able to only find a vast amount of media, but encouraged to seek out other films that are also alike based on their satisfaction within the first film. A second layer of analysis is scarcity advantage. We see in the status quo that if physical media becomes more scarce, the intrinsic value of the media starts to increase. But how does this actually play out? While media becomes extremely rare, such as 1,000 copies being available in the world, we find that people who receive the last copies are high-income individuals who want the item simply because of its scarcity, not because of an actual interest in the media itself. But how does this look like on side opposition? Well, since online streaming platforms have their media in the same place, we see that every individual movie, show, or song is virtually worth the exact same. No matter how old the media may be, we see that niche groups of people who only like songs from the 70s or any rare form of music are able to enjoy their unique interests without causing unnecessary competition. We see the impact of this being every individual is able to fully enjoy their interests, no matter how common or rare it is, without being barred out of an opportunity simply because they are unable to pay extravagant costs for a singular media source. Now moving on to our second substantive argument, which is environmental degradation. Physical media can lead to a severe environmental degradation when consumed at excessive rates. This is especially important to consider because in recent years, climate change has become more politically and socially relevant. We see that physical waste is a problem that only exists on proposition side of the house. Therefore, an increased reliance on online streaming decreases the amount of physical waste created by online media. Our first layer of analysis is production. In the status quo, that we see the production of physical media involves the extraction of raw materials, an energy-intensive manufacturing process, and the creation of packaging materials. This process contributes to the resource depletion and emissions. A type of plastic derived from fossil fuels is created from vinyl records, and its production involves the use of chemicals including chlorine. The extraction and processing of these raw materials contribute heavily to environmental impacts. But how does this actually play out? Well, the harmful effect doesn't stop in the composition stage of the media, but continues as it has to be dispersed into the environment. Physical media requires transportation through distribution centers and retail outlets, contributing even further to carbon emissions, as I mentioned earlier. Additionally, packaging materials, including plastic cases and shrink wrap, contribute even further to environmental waste. Another issue that does not exist on side opposition's house in today's debate. But the role that non-renewable resources play in the production of physical media sources undoubtedly hurts the environment, only furthering the effects of climate change. We see the impact is that we have an increased dependence on fossil fuels, which will inevitably lead to higher levels of air pollution and the worsening of climate change. Our second layer of analysis is biodegradability. In the status quo, we see that physical media is often single use, meaning that once a consumer purchases or consumes the content, the physical disc or product may not have a further purpose. But how does this actually play out? Well, physical media is rarely consumed today, and even with the rise of popularity in recent years, it is simply a trend that will fade out eventually. Once the vintage trend dies out, all forms of physical media will be discarded and contributing to the already overfilled landfills. We see that once this is thrown away, that physical media often will enter landfills where they remain for hundreds, if not thousands of years. For example, the plastic in CDs is not easily biodegradable, and as a result, they release harmful chemicals into the soil as they break down. The metal layers leach into the environment, posing potential risks to ecosystems and human health. We see the impact of this is the overfilling of landfills will result in the release of harmful substances into the soil and groundwater, impacting local ecosystems and posing potential risks to overall human health. It is because that opposition believes that streaming services not only best serve the consumer, but best serve the world. We are so proud to oppose today's motion.